Hey there. Welcome back to another Bible study. This is going to be the first in an experiment on branding. We moved this from being called Wednesdays in the Word to what we might call the Generalist Bible study. Broad scope, distinct voice. So that's our goal here, is to be studying the Word from a broad perspective, looking at what we can know and from the scriptures themselves, looking at church tradition, interpretation, and many other things. So today we want to work through a little bit of John chapter 2. One of the reasons we're calling this the Generalist is that most of the time today we do not form ourselves in a general scope, kind of becoming better at many things, but become experts in the fields that we are in. Experts in one thing or another. In theology, that's an expert in historical theology or practical theology or preaching, right? Uh, Here we want to look at this in a general way, uh, wherever your skill sets are, and raising them up. And so let us begin. On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. So this is again here, Jesus' home base is in Galilee. Cana is a city there. And on the third day. On the third day from what? Well, if we look up earlier, we have Jesus' baptism. We have the next day as Jesus is calling disciples. And now we are on the third day. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that John's gospel is not one where the chronology is designed, the pacing of the story is designed in a particular way. It's not designed to be understood perfectly by means of this was the 1st of April, then the 2nd of April, then the 3rd of April, but more in a spiritual sense. And so we want you to immediately see that on the third day is prepping us for something big. On the third day, we'll think about what happened on the third day. All the way at the end of the gospel, we'll see that Jesus will rise on the third day. And so that's already in our minds, that what will happen here at the wedding will be a resurrection of sorts, will be a display of his divinity. The resurrection aspect is often underplayed in this story, frankly, and it's a very cool aspect. So, diving into verse 2, Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. We know that the wedding, any wedding, is a return to Eden. It's an opportunity for, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, for God to add his yes to ours, transforming that wedding into holy matrimony, transforming our attempt and our hopes into something that God is adding his power and blessings to. And so they go. And verse 3, and the wine ran out, and the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. All right, that's not good, okay? It's not good for a wedding to be without wine, particularly in the ancient world. You would have a wedding that would go on for several days at a time, sometimes up to a week. That does not mean that they were sitting there just in a drunken stupor. The party must go on. The band has to keep playing for, 24 hours a day. Rather, these would be kind of cyclical gatherings where you would have the initial wedding activity, you would have the feast, you would have the consummation of the wedding, but then you would, over the course of the next several days, people would stay for a time for the evening, the celebration, and they'd go home, they'd sleep, they'd go to work, they'd come back in the evening, they'd eat, they'd rejoice together and celebrate, and it would go on in that way. So this was over the course of several days. And so if this is supposed to be Eden, what do we see? We see that in the modern world, in the fallen world, Eden is broken. What was created to be a wonderful, sustaining event no longer can. And so the good wine has run out. And the mother of Jesus here appears. This will be the first appearance of Christ's mother in the Gospel of John. And then we'll see that, again, there is a parallel from chapter 2 all the way to Jesus' crucifixion there in the end of the Gospel. There again, Jesus' mother will feature prominently. Here, she comes to Jesus and says, they have no more wine. Obviously, we know that Mary has an idea of who Jesus is and what his ministry will be. It's hard to necessarily suss out exactly what Mary is trying to do here. Is she simply telling her son, go back home, get more wine for them? Or is this more of an existential crisis? They're out of money, they're out of wine, they're out of time. Do something, or this marriage is going to already be on the rocks, even though it's just begun. It certainly feels a little bit more like that, particularly based on verse 4. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Well, here Jesus seems to hear in Mary's description and her demand, this imperative, that she is asking him to take on a messianic role, right? To care for, to sustain this earthly marriage in a way that only God can. Now, with that, we have the term woman. This certainly is something that many scholars have debated. What's going on here? Is Jesus being dismissive? Is Jesus here, again, going back to the tropes of Genesis 1, 2, and 3, right? You had man and woman. And so, is that what's going on here? Again, I think we need to read this in view of the crucifixion. John writes after Jesus' death, and so he writes with everything in mind. And with that, what does Jesus do from the cross? He looks down, he sees Mary, his mother, down there at the foot of the cross, weeping, right, fulfilling the prophecy that had been spoken in his birth, right, that a sword would pierce her own soul too, as she would watch her son die. And he looks at her. He does not address her as mother, but rather addresses her as woman, saying, woman, behold your son. Not meaning himself, certainly he was her son, but now John, the one who's writing this book, is given to Mary as a child, as a son, as one who will take care of her. And so, woman here, again, attaches us to that story as Jesus will care for her, but not as a mother, not in a special or privileged way because she was genetically connected to the earthly bodily nature of Christ, but rather as part of the creation. God will care for his creation. That's what's really going on here, is that Christ here is addressing her as a part of the creation. He is addressing her who has lifted up concerns as a creature, right? As someone whom he loves and cares for, not because of this intimate relationship that they have, that no one else gets to share, but rather he reveals the greater general love of God. What does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Again, here, my hour has not yet come. This is the hour of his death, and certainly the hour of his revelation of who he is. Mary, though, is undeterred. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Mary is assured by this that, yes, okay, he's not going to be crucified by this, but he can still bless this marriage. Now, verse 6, there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. That's a lot of wine, and we can, posit exactly how much that is. But you've got a community here. Let's assume that there's 30 people who were there, each one of these things holding 20 or 30 gallons. This isn't strong wine. This isn't wine like you would, have today. This is going to be typically a fairly weak wine, just enough alcohol in it primarily to kill whatever is there. It was an act of purification not just of water, but of purifying the water itself so that it would be safe to drink. That the ancient world drank so much beer and wine. Because the water could have all sorts of microbes in it, and so if you had alcohol in it, that would typically kill that and make it safe for you or I to drink. Now, Martin Luther, when he preaches on this, he makes a big deal out of the 6 stone water jars there. He makes an allegory that is a pulling out of an image here in order to help form us to see something there beyond the text. 6 stone water jars, we think about stone and 6. 6 is the number of creation that is incomplete. All right, God created the world in 6 days, but on the 7th day he rested, right? 7 is the day of completion, 6 is the day of creation, seeking completion. And stone here being an allusion to the law, the stone tablets that were given to Moses. And so the Jewish rites of purification, they work, all right, in order to wash and things of that nature, but not in a perfect way. You have to keep doing them. The law is never done until it's done perfectly. And so here Jesus transforms the law. He transforms what was the law is meant to be holding. As Paul would say that the law has a great glory, but the glory of perfection is infinitely greater. And so he takes these 6 stone water jars and he's going to do something amazing with them. He's going to use them to reveal glory, not of the law, but now of grace. And so Jesus says to the servants, fill the jars with water. They filled them up to the brim. All right. Why do we care that they're filled to the brim? Well, it means that Jesus is not sneaking anything in. That's actually an important line. To fill to the brim here, or almost to the point of overflowing, means that no one has room to put something else in. This gets at any of the detractors who would say, well, all right, Jesus just had a little bit of a little something, in his coat, and he just walked over, poured it in, and, that was it. And they were all drunk anyway, so who cared? Who could even tell the difference? That's not what happens here. These are filled to the brim. There's nothing that can be added nor taken away without it becoming obvious. And so it has to be a miracle, a transformation. Verse 8, he said to them, now draw out some and take it to the master of the feast. And so they took it. So they took a ladle or something of that nature, and they take it to the master of the feast. Now the master of the feast is typically someone you've hired to help run the festivities, make sure that everything is working all right. If you think about it, you have a party that's going to last for several days. If you've ever been involved in a wedding, you know how much planning and coordination go into that. And you often will see people who have professional roles as wedding planners. That's effectively the master of the feast. So this is a guy who knows his stuff. And so they took it to him, this water. And when the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. So in that moment, in that transference from one place to another, right, and not even necessarily in the transference, but simply in the doing, right, in that Christ has ordained that this water, once filled, would now be transformed into wine in an answer to his mother, and in a blessing to the wedding, and in the bringing of the fullness of God's presence and gifts to this foretaste of Eden. All right, even water tastes like wine. There's something to that, though this is definitely wine still. He tastes it, and he is over the moon. He brings the bridegroom. Now, the bridegroom, just think for a moment about this poor little sap, okay? The bridegroom knows that something is wrong. He can see the servants whispering. He can see, Mary going over to Jesus, and probably is a little annoyed that he had to invite Mary and Jesus, and Jesus brought some of his friends, right? I mean, he would have had enough, but now you got these extra guys, these fishermen, all right, who are just drinking, and they don't have anywhere to go, so they're just there all day. I mean, man, it's a party, but sometimes the party's got to stop, right? You can just imagine that the bridegroom is beside himself now. He's getting called over by the guy. Is this the end of the the payment, like, is the payment due? Is the music done? Are we going to be ridiculed now for having a terrible thing? He's got to just be utterly beside himself. He's certainly wrapped up, not in the beauty of his bride, not in the joy of community, not in all of the blessings that we have in this kind of Eden setting, right? That we call, a wedding. That's what, again, a wedding is supposed to be, is like this remembrance of Eden and all of the joys of fellowship and family and food and tea and taken care of in the joys and the promises of God. And he's not wrapped up in any of that. Instead, he's wrapped up in himself. He's wrapped up in his own sin, his own failures, his own misgivings, his own inability to make Eden Eden, right? I mean, this man, I'm sure, wants nothing more than to give his bride everything, and he can't. And so the master of the feast calls him over, and he's sure this is the curtain call. And the master says, everyone serves the good wine first. And when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. Right? You start good, you end bad. That's just how it goes, right? When you first get together, you want everybody, okay, to drink and to enjoy themselves and to come back the next night and the next night. And they all know it's going to get to be the cheaper, $5 chucks later on. But they also know that that's just how life goes. That weddings and marriage start so rich and joyful, and as it goes on, the cracks in life begin to form. But you have kept the good wine until now, the master says. The best wine, the wine that comes from the joys of God, is coming at the end. Certainly this is a joy for us as we enter and look at our own marriages, that what began so well can indeed end even better. And it also points us then to, as St. Paul says, that marriage is it's a mystery. It's a witness to Christ and the love he has for his church. And as we saw that good wine in Eden, we now experience a greater wine in the union of Christ and his church and the promise of the resurrection. And so we see kind of all of this kind of just there under the surface here in the text. Imagine again what this bridegroom must have thought at this. This man is nuts. He's off his rocker until he tastes it. Once he tastes that this really has happened, he knows it didn't come from him, so it only could have come from God or some other benefactor, and we're going to go with God in this case. This is the first of his signs that Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, in the Gospel of John, and we'll see this as we go through this book, you're going to find 7 different signs. The first part of the book of John, chapters 1 through 11, are called the book of signs. These are 7 signs in which, when Jesus does these signs or miracles, there is a testament to his messiahship, and people begin to believe in him. The second half of the Gospel of John, that is from chapters 12 through 21, are the book of glory. That is the testament to his glory through his death, resurrection, and then appearances. So here, this is the first sign. The disciples see this miracle of an Eden restored, renewed. They see this work of Christ as one who transforms and who blesses, and they believe in him, particularly as the Christ, right? As God. Not even, certainly as the Christ is one who will be Messiah for them. They don't have a full understanding of what that is yet, but here's God come to them. And after that, then in verse 12, after this, he went down to Capernaum. All right. Whatever you see went up or went down in the scriptures, particularly in the Gospels, I want you to think about elevation. Don't think about kind of north or south, all right? If you think about north and south, you will get lost in maps, and if you ever go to Israel, you won't know where to go. But up and down is the elevation, and that's what the scriptures are focusing on. Primarily because in the ancient world, they didn't have things like compasses or iPhones or, Waze or Waze or, Google Maps or things. You had to know where you were going. Maybe you had a map, but far more often it was just knowledge of elevation and pathways. So they went down. So Cana is a little bit higher, Capernaum a little bit lower in terms of elevation. And he went down to Capernaum. That's the main hub. That's where Jesus' ministry is based out of in the early years. And with his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. And that's where we'll end today's study. Thank you for joining us here on the Generalist study, and we will see you next week as we begin with John 2, verse 13, the first of Jesus' cleansing of the temple. God bless you. Bye-bye.